Hi, welcome to iEducator. This is Teacher Jeff. I'm a university teacher and an engineer by profession. And in today's lesson, we will be discussing in detail about Chapter 2. And Chapter 2 is all about the foundations of quality management. And as you can see, there are three key areas where we're gonna be placing our full focus and attention to. First, we will be discussing quality guru definition. Second, the era of quality gurus. And finally, quality gurus and their contribution. So what is meant then by quality guru? If we say quality guru, it refers to a good person, a wise person, and a teacher. A quality guru should be all of these, plus have a concept and approach to quality within business that has made a major and lasting impact. Now, these gurus have done and continue to do that in some cases, even after their death. In simple terms, quality gurus refer to teachers or masters of quality. Quality gurus are those teachers and masters who define what has become the contemporary meaning of quality in regulated industries and in mind of consumers, clients, and patients. Now, the next key area I'm going to be highlighting right now is the era of quality gurus. In this particular area, we might be asking ourselves the following questions. First, who are these quality gurus we are referring to? Second, why did they become quality gurus? And finally, how did they become known in the field of quality? What were their contributions? Now, as you can see, under the era of quality gurus, there have been three groups of gurus since the 1940s. During the early 1950s, Americans who took the messages of quality to Japan. During the late 1950s, Japanese who developed a new concept in response to the Americans, and during 1970s to 1980s, Western gurus who followed the Japanese industrial success. Now, in this particular era, we should be asking ourselves the following questions. First, who were these Americans who went to Japan? Second, why did they go to Japan? And finally, what were the specific messages of quality that they bring to Japan? Now, to answer the following questions, the Americans who went to Japan were Dr. William Edwards Deming, Dr. Joseph M. Juran, and Armand V. Feigenbaum. The question now is, why did they go to Japan? What up to them to go there? Now, in order to dig deeper about it, let us discuss about these American quality gurus during the early 1950s. Now, the very first American quality guru who went to Japan was Dr. William Edwards Deming. Dr. Deming was a prominent consultant, teacher, and author on the subject of quality management. Deming has published more than 200 works, including the well-known books, which are Quality, Productivity, and Competitive Position, and the Out of the Crisis book. Now, why did Deming go to Japan? There are actually two reasons why Deming flew to Japan. And the reasons that prompted Deming to go to Japan is because, first, Deming's idea to improve quality control were rejected by US manufacturers. What happened during that time was that Deming criticized the dominant method of quality control used by US manufacturers. Under this system, products were inspected for defects only after they were made. In contrary, Deming maintained it was better to design the manufacturing process to ensure that quality products were created from the start. This actually made economic sense because when a poorly made product came off the production line, a company faced two undesirable options. It could either be to scrap the piece. Scrapping the piece means wasting the materials, labor, energy, and financing costs that went into making that product. Or it could either be ship the product and risk alienating its customers. Deming firmly believed that making excellent items at the outset saved money and won customers, and he backed his ideas with statistical data. However, despite this suggestion of Deming, still, US manufacturers rejected the idea and even told him to go away, to get lost. According to Deming, American industries got lazy and rested on its laurels. It rejected the notion that industry should pay attention to what consumers wanted to buy, or that consumers would foot the bill for high quality products. Especially, American executives scoffed at the foolish idea that any other country, especially Japan, could compete. So that's the first reason why Deming went to Japan, because the US manufacturers rejected him. And the second and final reason why Deming went to Japan was because during that time, Japan lost the war, World War II to be specific. And during that time, Japan was so devastated by the war. Japanese industries were at low ebb due to the exhaustive use of its oil resources to support the war effort, and because most of the major production facilities had been destroyed by Allied air raids. Much of the country was flattened in World War II by Allied bombing raids, and two of its cities were obliterated by the first military use of atomic bomb. Now, the limited portion of Japan's industrial base that produced consumer goods was inefficient and worn to a state of near collapse. Consumer goods were of poor quality, but were readily purchased because of the short supply and the strong demand for goods unavailable during the war. And so, for this matter, to rebuild their shattered economy, Japanese invited an American industrial expert, Dr. William Edwards Deming. So what was the message or advice then that Dr. Deming gave to Japanese manufacturers when they sought his help? Now, Deming's advice to them was not to copy the American style inspection system, but to incorporate quality control principles into the manufacturing process. If the American companies rejected Deming's advice, in contrary, Japanese companies were all ears. In fact, when Deming first arrived in Tokyo, the top men in the companies didn't send just their engineers for an 8-day seminar. Instead, they came themselves. For Japanese manufacturers, Deming's ideas were a perfect fit. In the decades that followed, Japan's electronic and automobile companies carved out ever larger slices of the US and global marketplace for themselves. By the 1980s, the United States auto industry had lost a sizable part of the American car market to Asian auto companies. The US electronics industry shriveled. And apart from that, The cost was felt throughout the American economy. Cities and towns in America's industrial belts suffered as US manufacturers shrunk or closed their operations. Meanwhile, the US trade deficit grew enormously because Americans bought imported products that used to be made here. And today, almost any consumer product from light bulbs to running shoes is likely to bear the stamp of an Asian country of origin. And because of this, a few American companies requested Deming's assistance. Ford Motor Company, hemorrhaging money in the 1980s, was among the first to hire Deming to reshape its manufacturing operations. One result of that collaboration was Ford's revolutionary Ford Taurus, which became one of the best-selling cars of all time. Other US firms that turned to Deming for help included Xerox Corporation, Procter and Gamble Company, AT&T Incorporated, and the New York Times. And because US manufacturers once rejected Deming's advice for quality, and now that they are seeking Deming's help, Deming created 14 points for managing, or the 14 obligations of top management. So as you can see, these are the 14 points for managing, or the 14 obligations for top management that Deming created. Now, the first point for managing, according to Deming, is create constancy of purpose for improvement of product. Now, we can break this down into several components. First, we should always be improving what our customers are paying us for, whether goods or services. Second, we do this in order to compete presumably against anyone worldwide, stay in business presumably forever, and provide jobs. As you can notice, the most surprising piece is the mention of providing jobs as a goal. It is a goal for society at large, but a company creates jobs when it has to and does not make it a goal. What Deming is really after, however, is not job creation, but retention. As he elaborates on this point, he is saying that instead of worrying exclusively about quarterly profits, companies should have a longer-term strategy involving innovation, investment in research and education, and constant improvement in products or services, as well as in terms or internal processes, and that no employees should lose their jobs for contributing to improvement. And the second point, according to Deming, is to adopt the new philosophy. Deming's second point, or obligation to top management, is the most cryptic of all the Deming's points. But what Dr. Deming was referring to was a change of attitude and focus. Again, change of attitude and focus. Demings looked at organizations and companies as social systems. And in his description of how a system works and interacts with other systems, it has very different characteristics and behaviors that an organization with a collective has. And the third point, according to Deming, is to cease dependency on mass inspection to achieve quality. Now, Deming's third point is the first to mention quality, if you can notice, right? And it is specific, even if its implementation is sometimes a tall order. Its complete statement is cease dependence on inspection to achieve quality. Eliminate the need for massive inspection by building quality into the product in the first place. The idea that quality should be built into the design of the products and into the processes to manufacture them has come to be generally accepted in the past 30 years and even implemented in many industries. You never hear anyone arguing against it. At the same time, final inspection and test has never completely disappeared. Even in the car industry, engines, for example, are all tested before moving on to assembly. Even at the best manufacturers, and body point is visually inspected by people. And the fourth point, according to Deming, is to end the practice of awarding business on the basis of price tag alone. Now, what do we mean by this? It means that companies do not behave like individuals. Whether you buy food, clothing, household appliances, or the services of a plumber, you don't systematically choose the lowest price. For example, an astronaut on the launch pad, of course, you don't want every part in the rocket to have been made in the lowest bidder, right? Even if you are hunting for bargains, you also consider quality, delivery, and the availability of support. In principle, a company's purchasing agents should think the same way. When they don't, it is because they are evaluated on the prices they are able to negotiate and because they are not familiar with the actual use of the materials or equipment they buy. If you hired a third party to do your shopping with instructions to find the lowest prices, you are likely to be happy with the results or even to save money over time. Okay, so that's what about the fourth point according to Deming. And the next point, the fifth point according to Deming, is to improve constantly and forever every process for planning, production, and service. Now, at first sight, this point sounds exactly like the first one, which is about constantly improving products and services. What is the difference between the two then? Now, the first point was about output. On the other hand, point number 5 is about internal processes and systems. It says that improvement is an activity that must always be part of the life of any business organization. On this, Deming is on the same wavelength as Imai in Kaizen, which was published almost the same time as his book Out of the Crisis. Constantly and forever means that improvement in a plant starts on its opening day and ends only if it closes. Point 5 assumes that improvement is always possible and should always be pursued. And the next step or point, which is the sixth point, according to Deming, that would be to institute training on the job for all, including management, to make better use of every employee. Institute is a stronger language than implement. It's not just about making something happen, but turning it into an institution. In the language of the 1980s, on-the-job training was synonymous with sink and swim. For example, production line operators received some mandatory orientations on things like safety gears, but relied on colleagues to figure out how to do their work. So what was Deming talking about then? Deming's elaboration on point 6 actually drops the on the job and is entitled just Institute Training. It explains that it is the foundations of training for the management and for new employees, as opposed to continuing education. Regarding management, he points out that Japanese managers start their careers with a long internship, which is 4 to 12 years on the factory floor and in other duties in the company, implying both that it is systematic in Japan and not done anywhere else. Okay, so that is the sixth point according to Deming. Now, the seventh point according to Deming, institute leadership. The aim of supervision should be to help people and machines and gadgets to do a better job. Supervision of management is in need of overhaul as well as supervision of production workers. Now, this point of managing is divided into three parts. First, institute leadership. Second, the aim of supervision should be to help people and machines and gadgets to do a better job. And third, supervision of management is in need of overhaul as well as supervision of production worker. And so for this matter, let us discuss first the first part, which is institute leadership. Now, what does Deming mean by leadership and how to institute it? Well, when Deming argues that the job of management is not supervision, but leadership, he appears to be using leadership in the sense of this rare quality that escapes a precise definition. According to him, the aim of leadership should be to improve the performance of men and machine, to improve quality, to increase output, and simultaneously to bring pride of workmanship to people. In this context, he is referring to a role rather than quality. Again, he is referring to a role rather than equality. And also, the word management could be substituted by the word leadership without changing the meaning. For example, President Duterte is the new leader of the Philippines. It describes President Duterte's formal role, not his qualities. Okay, so that is part one of the whole point, which is the seventh point. Now, part two of the seventh point, that would be supervision should help people, machines, and gadgets to do a better job. Now, it can be interpreted primarily as a recommendation on the role of first-line management in a factory. Now, the name of this position has changed multiple times from the 19th century gang boss through the less brutal-sounding 20th century foreman to the gender-neutral supervisor and now to the vague and fuzzy group coordinator or area coordinator. Now, Deming's explanation focused on what is wrong with supervising people whose work you don't know, treating every problem as a special case, and managing by numbers. If being able to do the work of the people you manage is a requirement, then production supervisors will be exclusively drawn from the ranks of the operators, and this position will not be given to college graduates on their first job. And part three of this seventh point, that would be supervision of management, is in need of overhaul. Now, this is clearly about the higher levels of management, but Deming's elaboration on point 7 says nothing on this matter. In higher level positions, it is often impossible to find candidates with personal experience of the work of all their subordinates, which is true. And to take an extreme example, former presidents of the US are unanimous in saying that nothing could prepare you for that job. Okay, so that is the seventh point of Deming. Now, the eighth point, according to Deming, that would be drive out fear so that everybody may work effectively and more productively for the company. Now, this is actually a prescription that Doe Hyatt, a quality assurance manager at Boeing, found bewildering. First, he couldn't see how fear could be driven out. And second, where dangers are real, he didn't feel that fear was something to be avoided. Now, Deming is not arguing, however, that external threats like the competitors should be hidden from employees to make them feel secure. In this case, Deming is advocating to giving employees a genuine sense of security, which is both difficult to create and easy to shatter. Nothing can create such a sense quickly, but we can think of all sorts of human resource policies that can have this effect if carried out consistently over many years. And the ninth point, rather, according to Deming, that would be to break down barriers between departments and staff areas. What do we mean by breaking down barriers? Now, people in research, design, sales, and production must work as a team to foresee problems in production and in use that may be encountered with the product or service. These departments should cross-function together. Again, should cross-function together and should work well together to achieve a common goal. So we need to break down barriers. This point, according to Deming, that would be to eliminate slogans and exhortations for the workforce as they create adversarial relationships. Now, Deming believed that spending time and money on slogans, mascots, banners, monogrammed shirts or mugs, etc., are predicted on the assumptions. First, that quality and productivity problems are primarily due to lack of motivation in shop floor operators, and second, that it can be changed by the same kind of marketing campaign that works for selling detergents. Deming's point is that these are counterproductive and that these assumptions are false. And the 11th point, according to Deming, is to eliminate arbitrarily numerical targets for the workforce and management. Now, in Deming's point, by saying eliminate management by objective, eliminate management by numbers, Deming directly attacks Peter Drucker, the most revered guru of American management and creator of management by objective, or MBO. By the time Deming contradicted him, Drucker was an American institution, as sacred as the Constitution. But Deming was in his 80s when he wrote his 14 points, as in Japan had finally given him an audience in the US, and he must have known that he was running out of time to make his points. He thought MBO, or management by objective, was a bad idea, and he would not pussyfoot. Now, 15 years later, Drucker himself came around to the same point of view and recognized that MBO had failed. So what did Deming find wrong with it? Now, in the Practice of Management 1954, Drucker repeatedly asserts that it is essential for managers to have quantitative objectives to work towards. They should set these objectives themselves, consistent with the objectives of the business as a whole. But Drucker is short on how this could actually be done, how you identify proper metrics, how you set targets for each metric, and how you go about reaching these targets. It is not accidental omission. In Drucker's word, managers can find the answers themselves. It is part of their job, and they are supposed to have the requisite talents. Instead, Deming sees arbitrary objectives unrelated to the purpose of the business, set without any plan on how to achieve them, or even a means of taking accurate measurements. Deming sees MBO as an attempt to manage without knowledge of what to do. The managers focus on outcomes without looking into the processes that produce them. They end up gaming metrics rather than improving processes and playing management whack-a-mole. And the 12th point, according to Deming, is to remove barriers that rob people of pride of workmanship. Now, what do we mean by this? Dr. Deming's point 12 focuses on improving quality by eliminating barriers to workmanship pride. It's natural for people to take pride in their work, right? And because of that, we don't know anyone who lacks that pride gene. Yet, the company's management team unknowingly strips employees' self-respect by limiting his or her involvement in decisions, process, issues, and quality improvement. Remember, what's the most important asset within any company again? It is not the money. It is not the machine. It is not the building, and definitely not the raw or finished good. Instead, it's the people. It's the employees who are considered to be as the important assets of the organization. And according to Deming, barriers to workmanship pride cause low employee morale. In contrary, employee empowerment breaks down these barriers and increases employee morale, making employees responsible for quality, and quality improvement makes them own the production. When one owns their work, they take pride in their work, and therefore, quality improves, production improves. It's a win-win situation. And the next point, according to Deming, the 13th point is to encourage education. This point stresses continuous training of all employees within the organization. Remember, Dr. Deming believed in self-improvement. It's the responsibility of the management and the individual to gain new skills. The individual should always look for new skills and improve his or her abilities. Management should not only encourage training, but provide the means for the employee to gain new skills as well. And finally, the last point, according to Deming, is to clearly define top management's commitment to ever improving quality and productivity, or put everybody in the company to work to accomplish the transformation. The transformation is everybody's job. This means that management needs to take action to accomplish the transformation. And to do this, first, consider that every job and activity is part of a process. A flow diagram breaks a process into stages. Questions then need to be asked about what changes could be made at each stage to improve the effectiveness of other upstream or downstream stages. Now, everyone can be part of the team effort to improve the input and output of the stages. And everyone as well on a team has a chance to contribute ideas and plans. A team has an aim and goal toward meeting the needs of the customers. All right, I think that's a good place to stop. If you have questions, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for the latest updates. Thank you.